Hello everyone, welcome back again. Firstly, apologies, it's been a couple of weeks since the last video update. I'm still on light duties unfortunately, but hopefully another week or so and I'll be back into it as normal. Looking forward to getting back under the bonnet of the cars and getting the hands covered in grease again. So hopefully that's not too far away. I have taken the time, the opportunity to purchase the hardware for the Motec system on the cars so I can do a download and understand what's going on with the engine side of things and the mapping. And also it's quite interesting, which I'll put this together in a separate video, but it's quite interesting to download the data on the engine and the car, both historical and current, and which will give us a bit more of an idea on why the engine's running the way it is. Now in the meantime, I've taken the opportunity to answer some of your questions that I've been ducking and weaving around for quite a while. A lot of the questions you've asked revolve around how these projects are funded and what it costs. So I thought I'd put together this video now while I'm a bit limited what I can do physically and cover off some of these questions. So when the next update rolls around, you're completely up to speed and it'll focus purely on the cars and where they're at the time. You'll see in this update, it actually involves another chassis that I had something to do with 10 or 15 years ago, which does have a link to Glen Seton, and it does involve me crashing it, which isn't great. And it also, I guess, tells a bit of the backstory on where we are today. So I hope you enjoy. I look forward to bringing you more on the cars as soon as I can. Thanks again, enjoy. So between 10 and 15 years ago, an opportunity came up through mutual friends that I could purchase or have the opportunity to purchase an old V8 supercar. Now keep in mind, 10 or 15 years ago, the cars weren't worth nearly what they are today. They weren't in overly high demand, and a lot of cars, even race-winning chassis, were going for less than half what they do today. So I looked into it and I worked out that if I could sell a few of my projects I had happening at the time and also move on some of the parts that came with the car, I could just afford to purchase it. I'd need to save up a budget to restore it, but it was doable all the same. And being a lifelong V8 supercar fan and a car enthusiast in general, I thought it was too good an opportunity to pass up. So over the next few weeks, we put together a deal to purchase the car. And this car was a Brytec chassis. It last ran the main game in 2007 with Alan Gurr driving. So it wasn't an overly successful chassis. It didn't have any podiums, didn't have any race wins. So for an entry point to get me into, I guess, a little bit of experience with these cars, it was perfect for what I was looking for. So I managed to purchase the car. It was last run in the Dunlop series by Cedars Racing Team with Colin Cedars driving, and it was the Bisley Workwear BA or BF Falcon. So once I got the car home, I was able to sell off some of the excess spare parts and inventory that came with the car, and that went toward funding, I guess, some of the work that needed doing. The car was in pretty rough shape. Obviously, it had run many years in the main game and running in the Dunlop series as well. There wasn't a lot left that didn't need attention. So once it was home, I started to look into the history. Now, you may recall, Brytec was formed in 2005, and they used a lot of the cars and spares and support from FPR at the time. So I was reasonably confident there was a link back to FPR from 03 and 04, which would be Glen Seton and Craig Lowndes. At that stage, I knew that 2005, 6 and 7, it ran as a Brytec chassis. Alan Gurr raced it in 2007, and then there was a range of drivers in 2006 and 2005. And one reference point I had is it did run a one-off livery at Bathurst in the black and blue Fujitsu livery, which was quite well documented at the time. And it was caught up at the tail end of Marcus Ambrose's massive shunt at Bathurst in 2005. Interestingly, if you have a look at this footage on a side note, this was only pointed out to me a while ago. If you have a look at Ambrose's belts after he's hit the fence backwards, you can see his left hand shoulder strap has actually completely dislodged from the car. So getting back to the chassis at hand, we knew from the logbooks and the documentation that we knew its Brytec lifespan, which did involve a massive accident in Darwin in 2007, where it hit the earth bank early in one of the races. That involved a massive rebuild of the car, and a lot of the FPR originality was done away with as the car was repaired. So the car itself was always going to be a very difficult job to get back to its early FPR days, if that link was still there.
Watch where that ute hit the wall. There's fluid on the road here. It's obviously damaged the front end. See whether the replay tells us more about it. There was another car involved, and it's Fabian Coulthard, the other car, but we don't know the details of how and why, but it's fired it into the fence at a great rate.
So over the next 6 months or so, I continued to do a lot of digging about the chassis, and I was able to confirm with 100% accuracy that the chassis was actually built brand new in 2003 for Glenn Seton.
Yeah, there's been a few big birthdays this weekend, Rusty, with the Ford teams, and one of those especially is Glenn Seton. Now FPR have 2 BA Falcons along in that team.
Now they built 2 chassis, or 3 chassis that year I should say, one for Craig Lowndes, one for Glenn Seton and one for David Bernard. So this was the second chassis they built, which Glenn debuted at Winton in 2003. Now he raced this same chassis throughout 2003 and 2004, and as you may recall if you're a die-hard Ford fan, wasn't an overly successful time for Ford fans and FPR at the time. A lot of engine issues and a lot of teething issues from a new team forming out of the ashes of Glenn Seton Racing.
Seton's in.
Remember, the pit window opened on lap 2. So Glenn Seton decides to come in on lap 13. By the way, HRT expect to have their second new car, the sister car.
That's a
Glenn
problem.
Seton, that's a big problem. He's gone straight in and parked it. And we understand that he slowed on the track. I think Greg Rust has gone straight down there to check it out. Goods up for Ceto. As the FPR guys go to...
Now, out of the documentation I had gathered over the previous 6 months, I was able to work out that the car was a long way from where it started its life in 2003. The car now had a KRE engine in it, which was changed by Brytech. The suspension had been changed, and the car did have a massive rebuild in 2005 and 2006 and had a full Brytech spin put on it. So to put the car back to exactly as it ran, as Glenn Seton had it in 2003 and 2004, was going to be a big ask and something that wasn't really possible with my budget and knowledge at the time. So what I elected to do was completely strip the car back, straighten everything out, replace all the door sills, panels, paint the inside of the car and make it present really well, and also tidy up a lot of the mechanicals so I could take it out to a track day here and there and just enjoy the car for what it is. Obviously, as a collector car, it wasn't the most desirable at the time. There wasn't a lot of call for the cars, wasn't a huge value, so it was fairly safe that I could paint the car up, go and have a little bit of fun with it and just enjoy a piece of Australian motoring history. So over the next 2.5 years, as the budget allowed, I've slowly restored the car back to its 2004 presentation. I completed all these works myself on a really limited budget, and it was a really good learning process, as a lot of the stuff that I'd learnt was self-taught. Now, Image Racing were able to help me with a few aspects of the car, which I'm really appreciative of. And when I got the car back together mechanically, I got them to go over the car just to make sure everything was safe and everything was up to speed, because if you do get something wrong with these cars, as you'd know, it can be extremely costly. So we managed roughly about the 3-year mark to get the car back in its livery, presenting really nicely, and the opportunity came up to run the car at a state level round in a sports sedans race alongside the sister car being the Craig Lowndes Caterpillar Falcon. I decided at that point that that would be the car's first outing, running on the understanding that I wouldn't be overly competitive in the car, but I could wobble around in my own space, stay out of everybody's way, and hopefully bring the car back at the end of the weekend straight alongside the Cat Falcon. So as you'll see here, that plan didn't eventuate. It wasn't even close. I actually sent Terry Wyhoon out in the car for the first couple of sessions, as he knows the cars well, and if there was an issue that I may not pick up, he would pick up with the car's setup or how it was prepared. So I managed to get the car out for one practice session and qualifying, and then after that we were straight into the races, and I started in the first half a dozen rows. As you'll see here, I got a good start. I was just trying to find my gap in the field alongside the Cat Falcon, and unfortunately a car in front ran off at turn 1, and instead of gathering it up and getting back on the road, came back on halfway through turn 2, dive bombed a car at the entrance of turn 2 and turn the car around in front of me. Having the Cat Falcon on the outside of me, being the right, I had one option and to go left, and unfortunately the Falcon in front of me rolled off the brake. You'll see in this footage here, I had time to even pluck it down a gear or two and comprehend what had just happened, and I was still getting hit as it turned up to be between a 5 and 10 car pile up at turn 2, which wasn't ideal to say the least. My initial thoughts were the Cat Falcon had ended up into the side of me, which I had a look for, but it was a VS Commodore and it wasn't the Cat Falcon. He managed to escape on the right-hand side. As you can see, every single panel was bent on the car, and everything that I'd worked toward for the last 2.5 years was completely destroyed. I never ran the car again after that. The Supercars used it for some promotional activities after I'd spent the next 2 years putting it back together again. But I realised at that point that I don't have the budget to really run these cars properly, and I simply couldn't afford for what had just happened to happen again. So this is where the funding side of things comes into the story. Throughout that time, and just after I'd got the car back together, I was approached by a fairly prominent figure in the supercars world wanting to know if I knew where the FPV Glen Seton Falcon was. It was then explained to me that David Richards in the UK, the owner of ProDrive, was looking to purchase one of the early V8 supercars from their time in supercars from 2003 onwards to place in his museum over in England. So after a little bit of back and forth, we managed to put together a deal that saw us sell the FPV Falcon back to ProDrive, and we're able to use the funding and generated from that sale to put toward the Supercheap Auto Falcon. Now, obviously, what worked in our favour is in the time I'd owned the car and the improvements that I'd done to it, it was worth a little bit more money. So we were able to put that funding toward the Supercheap Auto Falcon, and then obviously use some of our savings that we'd saved up over time to get into the restoration. Now, obviously, again, the Supercheap Auto Falcon and FTR3 were very low-hanging fruit in the supercars field. They weren't worth a lot of money because they were so far from their original condition it wasn't funny. And if we were to pay somebody to restore these cars for us, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars at a normal labour rate. Obviously, doing the work myself, using the skills that I've learned over this journey, I'm able to do it for a fraction of the cost while also returning these cars back to how they used to present during their racing life. The main part for me is not the financial side of it. There have been a lot of people ask, is it worthwhile? Long story short, no, it's not. But at the end of the day, seeing these cars back preserved in the condition they were in makes it all well worthwhile. So you've seen photos of the FPV Falcon leaving Australia. I've also got some footage which I'll put up now of the car arriving in England, and also when they got it, the first thing they did is fire it up because they wanted to have a listen to an Aussie V8. The several thousand kilometre trip didn't do it any harm, and it still sounded just as good as when it left the Australian shores. I hope in the next update I'll have some more technical information for you as I've been able to get back into the restorations on the cars. Thanks again for your support throughout this time. I'll put up this footage now of the car arriving in England, being started up, and I'll also put a footage of the accident up without me talking over the top of it, so you can have a listen to the engine on the car, which does sound mighty strong, as any Aussie V8 would. Thanks again for your support. I'll look forward to speaking with you again soon.